down that camera and strap in. It's time for another episode of TOGCHAT Live. Get ready for 60 minutes of wall-to-wall photography, including photo news and tips, along with your photography questions in real time, with answers from your host, Olympus Visionary Joe Edelman.
Hey, that's me. Hey gang, it's Wednesday. That means it's time for our weekly photography chat. Thanks for joining me for the live YouTube edition of TOGCHAT. As you know, my mission is to help photographers like you develop a better understanding of the hows and whys behind great photography. As always, do me a solid, gang. Before we get going, please tell your photography friends that we are streaming live on YouTube right now. As always, you can go ahead and you can hit that little share button like right down there, or you can share the link. Let me type it in here. It is tog.chat/live. Okay, so I'll give you guys that in the chat window there. Please go ahead and let people know. And if you're here, type, check in. Let me know you're here. Let me know where you're watching from. It's always cool to see how there's people here from all over the world. I've got Patrick here checking in from Paris. William is in Ottawa, Canada. Tina all the way out in Washington State. Wolfgang in Berlin, Germany. Theo from the Netherlands. Caleb from Austin, Texas. Lynn from upstate New York. Don from Michigan. People from everywhere. Doyle in Houston. Alvin in Virginia. Matthew in Manchester, UK. Humberto in Israel. It's so cool to be able to have a worldwide conversation about something that we all love so much. So please, seriously, check in. Let us know where you're from, okay? That being said, I want to dig right in. So I got a couple quick announcements for you. My title slide tonight said, it's a new world. It's time to try some new things. For all of us, you should be trying new things. I mean, even if you've been doing my Stuck at Home challenge, you're probably trying a lot of new things. And that's cool. I talked about this last week. If you are really applying yourself to the Stuck at Home challenge, and by the way, really applying doesn't mean that you have to do a picture a day. It doesn't mean that it's got to be, oh my God, epic. No, I just mean if you're really trying to make it a point while we're in this crazy situation that we're in to get your camera out and to try things that you've never done before, or to try things in ways that you've never done it before. If you do that, you're going to walk away with new tools. So even if you don't normally shoot crazy abstracts like I'm doing, because I don't normally shoot abstracts, but the colors that I'm experimenting with them, the way that I'm mixing them, all kinds of things, I'm going to be able to take away, and I'm going to be able to use that in my work down the road. So it's not time wasted. But part of the new world time to try new things is let's try that again. With regards to education. I have, obviously been doing this YouTube stuff for going on 5 years now. I travel, I teach workshops, which can't happen right now. I am excited to say, if it happens, and obviously the big words there are, if it happens, I am scheduled to present at Shutterfest, which currently is scheduled to go off sometime in June. I am going to be presenting in the beginning of August in North Carolina at the Carolina Photo Expo, and right after that in Chicago at ClickCon. Just found out about that the other day. So fingers crossed we get back to the point where those events can happen. I'll be honest, I'm not so sure we're going to be there, but I sure hope it works out. But in the meantime, my challenge was, hey, there's still a lot of people that want to do a lot of learning, and I still need to pay my bills, and I still want to be able to help photographers. So what I have done is a lot of research, done a lot of cram and jam learning on my own, actually, and I am going to start doing online webinars for you guys. Now, to be clear, I am going to be doing a mix of webinars, meaning a mix of some that will be paid, many that will be free. So I'm actually starting out, my very first one is tomorrow night. So if you happen to be free this time tomorrow night, you have to register, but sign up. I will drop the links in here for you guys. This is on my website on the speaking and events and webinars link. You'll see tomorrow I've got one that's called Understanding Creativity to Improve Your Photography. you do have to register. This is a webinar. This is not going to be broadcast on YouTube. You need to be there, okay? I will give you a little tip. If you would like to attend the webinar, but it just so happens you can't be there tomorrow night at 6 p.m. Eastern Time here in the US, you have two options. Option number one is, since this is a free webinar, I will repeat this webinar at some point over the summer. Or you can sign up for the webinar today. Again, it's free. And the video of the webinar will be available to watch for 24 hours after the webinar ends. That's it, 24 hours, then it goes away. It's not going to be a YouTube thing, okay? My goal is to take a lot of the presentations that I do in person as I travel around the country and adapt them to work online. And I picked this particular one, the Understanding Creativity to Improve Your Photography, because I think it's one that I can actually do that with, in part because I don't want to do just crappy webinars. I've been to a lot of really bad webinars. I don't want to inflict that on anyone. So you know, tomorrow it's my first run. I've never done a webinar before, but I'm feeling pretty good about it. I've been working on this for the last couple of days and started doing some kind of rehearsing and practicing today, really trying to get myself familiar with the software that I'm using. I think it's going to be pretty good. I will tell you that spots are limited. While it sounds like a lot, I can have 300 people attend this webinar at one time live. We've got about 270 people signed up already, and registrations are still coming in. So if you're interested, sign up. Next week, next Friday, and this won't be for as many of you, but this is another free one. I'm doing a webinar on building your personal brand. Clients hire you, not your camera. Now, again, this is a free one. This will be the first in a series of marketing webinars that I am going to do. I'm going to put the link for this one here in the chat window also. Some of the marketing webinars will be paid. In other words, there will be a fee. I will tell all of you now, just before you panic, I'm committed. The overwhelming majority of my paid webinars will cost no more than $10. There are a couple topics coming up down the road that may be a little bit more just because of what I'll be providing in them. But the marketing webinars, once we get into numbers 2, 3, and 4, they will have a small price tag. And literally, it's just going to be a couple of bucks, okay? I'm going to make it affordable. But here's the bottom line, right? If your goal is to make money as a photographer, or if you're trying to make money as a photographer and you can't afford 10 bucks to learn and to improve, you're doing something really wrong. Just saying, okay? But these two, they're free. So I would love to have as many of you there, especially tomorrow, as possible, so that you know, I can really test out this software, get a lot of people using it. It's actually kind of pretty cool the way it sets up. There will be a chat window, kind of like what you have here on YouTube, but there's also the ability to do a Q&A at the end. There's some live polling that's going to take place where I'm going to have you folks participate in some polls. So I honestly, I think it will be it'll be a lot of fun. John Edward here is just asking, as a participant, do I need to prepare something before the webinar? No, you don't have to prepare anything, John Edward. You don't need any special software. It all works in your browser. You'll get the best experience in Chrome, but it actually works in any of the browsers, Safari. I haven't tried it in Edge, but works in Safari, works in you know, Firefox, works in Opera. So yeah, again, you know, if you want to take notes, you can take notes, but as I mentioned, you'll be able to replay it for up to 24 hours. Okay. So again, I hope to see you guys there. And, you know, it's worth noting here while I'm on this page, depending on where you're at in your, you know, photography experience and photography career, obviously there's a lot of different ways you can learn from me, including, you know, these online webinars. I do one-on-one photography mentoring through video consultations, and I even do video workshops at this point, and I have a mentoring program. So I would encourage you, check all that stuff out. I'll go ahead and put the link to that page that you're looking at on the screen right now in the chat window there so that you have it. Okay? All right, so let's dig into our questions. Let me just make sure that I didn't miss anything on the I didn't on the webinars. Okay, cool. So I had a couple of questions that came in before we got started tonight that were posted in my Facebook group. So I want to go ahead and hit those first. And the first one came in from Don Bender. His question was, what's the best way to digitally archive old color and black and white negatives? So Don, honestly, my response to that is it depends. What I mean is it depends on what you're intending to do with those images that you want to archive. What I mean is this. There are services that most camera stores offer now where they'll sell you a box, and anything that you can fit into the box, you can get it scanned digitally. You could put in a VHS tape. You could put in old Sony Betamax tapes. You could put in CD-ROMs. You could put in snapshots. You can put in old color negatives, old color slides, whatever. If you can cram it in the box, and literally what they do is they use a service, they ship it off to India, it comes back. It's actually very safe. There's a lot of companies doing it. It's legit. Your stuff will make it back, etc. Yes, read the fine print. There are some disclaimers, but tons of companies doing it. It's a very common practice. Okay. I would say that's a great way to do it inexpensively if you basically just want to have this stuff digitally. In other words, if you're not going to be making big gallery style prints from it, right? Certainly you can do it yourself. You can get gadgets like, I happen to grab this one. This is a real cheap one. It's Optica. It's a gadget that threads on, and this sits on the end of my 60 millimeter macro lens from Olympus. It screws right onto it, and I can do slides with it, and I just basically fire a flash, boom, do it that way, and it actually works great. Okay, that's one way to go about doing it. You can get inexpensive, film scanners, things like that. Amazon, B&H, all your local camera stores, they all sell, film and digital slide scanners. The big thing is if you are going to do it yourself, understand that it's not just enough to get a scanner. You need to get good old-fashioned film cleaner and film cleaning cloths. And you've got to clean your slides, clean your negatives, because otherwise when you scan them, every little piece of dust and dirt. And then, of course, keep in mind that it's film that you're scanning. So there's going to be grain. And when you scan, since you're going to blow light through that film, the grain tends to show up a lot more, especially if it was grainy in the first place. So you're going to potentially be running noise reduction. You're going to have to do, the modern version of spotting, which is going to be healing tool and clone stamp. So there's, potentially a lot of post-production that's going to happen when you do it yourself. So that's really kind of the key. You've got to really evaluate, like, what do I really want out of these? Honestly, I know when my mother passed away, this was quite a number of years ago now, she had tons and tons of family pictures. Some of them were literally just in boxes. Some were in photo albums and that. And as much as I would have loved to have taken the time to get them all scanned, because there are a lot of pictures from when I was a little kid that I wanted to be able to pass on to my grandkids and that kind of stuff. But I knew I wasn't going to have the time to do it or the patience to do it. So literally what I wound up doing is I wound up copying them with my iPhone. I set up some very soft light, and this was before I was an Olympus user, by the way, but still the iPhone plan works just fine. And I set up nice light, and I would just lay the picture down, and I would, be careful to line up the phone, kind of fill the frame the best I could with the image and shoot it. And I created, a huge digital library of these old snapshots. And honestly, for what I need and for what I wanted from the pictures, it's more than adequate, right? So a lot of options, Don. It's a matter of how much effort are you willing to put in or how much money you're willing to spend. For me, I would start at the finish line. Why do you really want them archived? What are you hoping to be able to do with those archive files? And then that's going to kind of determine, going backwards, which process you're going to use. I hope that helps. I saw somebody, I think Michael posted along the way here, and I apologize, Michael, it went by really quick. Recommendations on who to use for the scanning. Honestly, I wish I could tell you the name of a company. I don't know of any off the top of my head. I do know, actually, that in my Facebook feed recently, I've been seeing ad after ad after ad after ad for a digitizing service from Kodak. I have a feeling it's probably not actually Kodak doing it. They're probably licensing the name to do it. But nonetheless, I've been seeing those ads around a lot. Honestly, kind of my philosophy on stuff like that, I would at least want to be able to deal with a local. And again, this is, a little bit of old school thinking. I know that the images, if I do that, they're going to go overseas. I understand that. But I would at least like to be able to take them to a local retailer to do it, primarily because that way I know that here's a local business that has their name on the line when they put these things in a box and ship them to this company overseas, right? They're still getting shipped anyway it goes. But at least that way, I've also got kind of the reassurance of, hey, here's a person that I can go and look at and talk to that's using this service, and their business reputation is, tied into that. So that would be my approach. But there's a bunch out there. If you hit Google, you will find tons of them. But I don't have a specific recommendation. I'm sorry. So, all right, the next one I had here. This one was from Ken. Whoops, I hit the wrong button. That always helps, doesn't it? Ken Schallenberg. I saw Ken come in here a little while ago. So, Ken, asking about the Olympus high-res mode. Any settings, do's and don'ts? Would you use it for shooting interiors? So let's actually start at the last question. Would I use it for shooting interiors? Depends on what I need in terms of my output. For images that are going to be used for like online real estate listings and things like that, honestly, Ken, there's no need. Especially being an Olympus shooter, you understand how sharp the Olympus lenses are. There's more than enough detail there for anything that's going to go online. Now, if for some reason, let's say you get a commercial client and they want you to shoot some interiors for them to be able to have like wall size prints made. Well, obviously you guys know that I've had 48-foot images on billboards just with the regular files out of Olympus. But certainly if I knew going in that the shot that I'm taking is going to be that big on a billboard, I would probably be swayed to go ahead and shoot in high-res mode just to have that little bit of extra file, mainly from the standpoint of processing, just to be able to work it a little bit more. For those of you that have never done real estate work in that, it does depend a lot on the technique that the photographer uses, but I'm sure you can imagine going to people's homes, even into office buildings, etc. Oftentimes the lighting scenarios are simply horrible, and oftentimes it's actually harder and not as good an outcome to try and actually light the scene. So what you wind up doing is you wind up working by doing multiple exposures, blending together, kind of an HDR type scenario where you're shooting for the shadows, shooting for the midtones, shooting for the highlights, putting it all together. So in situations like that, the more data that you have to work with, the better. But for images that are going to go, on real estate listings, never going to know the difference. In terms of do's or don'ts, Ken, nothing special, really. I mean, what's great about the high-res modes with Olympus is, as long as you're basically putting the camera so we're not talking about handheld. I wouldn't use the handheld for the interiors. You could. Certainly it works. But I find for me, if I'm doing a gig like that, any gig, I'm a little bit type A, and I tend to work in more of a hurry than I should. So the handheld high-res for me is a desperation only feature, meaning I'm out, I'm shooting, and I don't have my tripod with me, but for whatever reason I feel that this image really needs the high res. Well, then handheld is my only option, right? But as long as you're following the directions for high res and using a tripod, etc., there's really not a lot of do's and don'ts that I've encountered. And then, you know, as far as settings, you're basically just going to set your exposures the way you normally would, let the camera do its thing. So there's nothing really fancy that you have to do there. Okay. All right. Next up, this is an interesting one. This one comes from Alvin. How do you overcome being in front of the lens, be it for videos or stills? Alvin, I'm not sure that I have actually overcome it yet myself. I think honestly, it's like anything else. Practice makes perfect. Doyle, thank you so much. I appreciate the super chat. Thank you. Practice makes perfect. Guys, you can see if you go back and look at my very first videos, my early videos, not only was I severely overweight, but just my presentation, it was, very, very serious and, very formal. And it was just, it's horrible to watch. And it wasn't me. I mean, it really wasn't my personality. It was kind of what I felt I needed to be. So, if anything, I would tell you when you get in front of the camera, you got to be yourself, right? Because that's all you're really capable of being, unless you're an amazingly good actor, which I am not. So, you got to be yourself. But honestly, it just takes practice. You just got to keep doing it and you get used to it, okay? I've always been a firm believer if whatever it is, if it's being in front of the camera like this, if I'm passionate about what I'm doing and I can provide value to people, then it's going to work out, right? That's the key. Even if it's just for the matter of doing like a self-portrait, Alvin, if you want the picture bad enough and you believe in the shot that you're putting together and you're excited about making a great picture of yourself, that in and of itself is a great first step because you're going into it with the right attitude. And just like anything else, don't be afraid to suck. You got to experiment. You got to keep trying things. If you are doing that self-portrait, you're not going to shoot 5 frames. You're going to shoot 50, maybe 100, maybe 150. And it's not just shooting frames, but it's experimenting, trying things, looking at what you're getting and experimenting, trying something different if it's not working out, right? But practice makes perfect. That is the key. All right, so back to the thread here now. Let's go back to the beginning. Sven had a question here. I guess it's just gas. That's always telling right out of the box. But I want to get a 25 millimeter for large groups. Sven's an Olympus shooter, so basically he's looking for a 50 millimeter. 10 plus people and full length shots instead of using the 12 to 40 Pro that I have. Would it be any point in a 25 instead of the zoom at 25? Sven, I'm going to assume that you're talking about the 25 f1.2, the Pro lens. Obviously that gives you a 1.2. That gives you the famous Olympus feathered bokeh, neither of which are really going to be appropriate for group shots or full-length shots for that matter. So, yeah, it's kind of pretty much just gas. Working with the 12 to 40 and setting it at 25 millimeter, it's going to work out just fine. I mean, it's an f2.8 lens. It's more than fast enough. So, yeah, I mean, it's one of those things, I guess, if you can afford it and you want to have a little bit of fun, with the gas, by all means, go for it. But I don't think that it's going to make a difference in the outcome of your shots. So, okay. All right, a question here from Michael. For black and white, is it better to take it in color and then in post make it to black and white, or take it in camera black and white all raw? Is the dynamic range difference? So, Michael, actually, I talk about this a lot. In fact, I talked about it recently in my Stuck at Home Challenge videos. Okay, but here's the answer. They don't make cameras that actually shoot black and white and raw, right? So even when you're shooting in black and white in your camera, you're shooting in color. I think what you're meaning is like setting the camera to the black and white setting. For me, it is never better to just shoot in color with a color preview and then fix it later. That's what people started doing because people are lazy when we got digital technology, when it was like, yeah, this picture's not very exciting. Let me see it in black and white. Click. Oh, cool. It looks good in black and white. And that's when we started seeing lots and lots and lots of bad black and white. Whereas pre-digital, we saw a lot of really good black and white. So, yes, anytime I have an idea for black and white, I change my color profile in camera to black and white. And, Michael, I push the contrast setting to +2, which is the maximum for my Olympus cameras. Some cameras, I believe Nikon goes to +3. Whatever it is, switch your color profile to black and white, and then switch the contrast on that black and white or monochrome setting to +2 or +3, whatever your camera's maximum is. That way you're going to see an image that looks very much like black and white film. The one downside to the monochrome profiles in pretty much every camera brand on the market is if you just switch to monochrome, the preview image that you're seeing, it shows you the tonal ranges, but it shows them to you very flat. In fact, you almost never see a pure black in those. And believe me, I've tried this on pretty much every camera brand out there. You just don't. So by pushing that contrast to the max, for me, I found that pretty much every camera brand, that's where I'm getting an image that really truly replicates what I would have seen shooting black and white film. And yes, I mean, back in the day, Michael, a photographer would frequently shoot the same subject with one exposure setting and even slightly different lighting for color than they would for black and white, different exposure setting and slightly different lighting because of the way the two types of films would render tonal ranges, etc. So it's very important. And regardless of how you get to the finished black and white image, black and white is still black and white. We're still talking about the grayscale, pure white, pure black, and all the grays in between. So being able to see that in camera when you do the shot gives you a much higher sense of confidence that the picture you're creating is actually going to look good in black and white. So black and white should always be a creative choice that is made while shooting, not a, I wonder if this will make a bad picture look good choice that's done after shooting, right? Okay, next up here. And by the way, this is becoming like so normal and so everyday. My apologies. I hope, since you're all here and you're all chatting, that you're all doing well. I hope your families are safe. I hope you're all, continuing to be safe, continuing to practice social distancing, all that stuff. Wow, I can't believe that because really it just felt like any other talk chat tonight. This is becoming kind of the new norm, right? But seriously, please continue to be careful and diligent about what we're doing here, okay? Let's see here from Lane. Question is, if you can afford both, would it be better to work with gels or RGB LEDs for the general purpose of shooting people, abstracts, landscape photography? Well, I mean, RGB lights or RGB LEDs for landscape is going to be tough, right? So I realized that was kind of an afterthought in your question, Lane. Honestly, Lane, it depends on so many things. There's no better. That's one of those questions that anyone that answers it, myself included, all they're going to do is give you an opinion based on what they like to do. There's not a right or wrong. Because the problem of it is, when we're talking landscape photography, you would need some doggone bright lights to have any impact on landscape photography. But certainly not gels, because you'd still need really bright lights to have an impact. But colored filters on your lens could have an impact on the scene. That's one of those categories. It really depends on what you're trying to accomplish, how large the scene is, and also what your budget permits. But there's not a definitive, this is best. There just isn't, okay? All right, next up here, scrolling on down. Alvin, should you use full stops, half stops, or even 1/3 stops? Whatever you feel like. You'll notice that pretty much every camera brand on the market today, the default is 1/3 stop. So what does that tell us? That tells us that that's how the engineers who design these cameras have designed them to work. So for me, which do I use? I use 1/3 stop. I actually find half stops to be much easier. Why? Because I learned on half stops. Because my old film cameras had half stops. So it was just easier, right? But it's not. There's no better to it. Basically, with 1/3 stops, you're essentially getting more control. It's a little bit of an oxymoron in the sense that the cameras have this thing called dynamic range, right? So being off, less than a third, because the difference between third stops and half stops is like less than a half a stop, right? So it's not going to ruin a shot in either direction. So if you find it easier to go half stops, you're going to be fine. You really are. I think full stops would be maybe a little bit limiting. But yeah, all the cameras we have are designed at half stops. Excuse me, 1/3 stops. So for me, I just leave mine defaulted at 1/3, and that's absolutely fine. I don't have a problem with that. So, all right, next here. You guys are doing great. Keep the questions coming. Let's see here. And Tina, you're waiting for your Godox V860. Congratulations. The goal is to learn how to freeze water splashes. You're going to use the Godox as a side light and the Olympus FL M3. Can you trigger the Godox with the Olympus flash? Yeah, if you trigger it optically, you won't be able to trigger it with the same transmitter. But if you trigger it optically, then that will totally work. Yep. Okay. All right, so let's see. Don, apologies if it's been asked and answered previously, but would you mind talking about your experience with developing and film post-production? You talking like film all the way? The last time I developed a roll of film was in 1999. Maybe really, really early 2000. Oh, no, actually, no. Maybe early. Yeah, so 1999. 1999 was the last time I developed roll film. When I picked up digital, I switched. That was it. Done. Never went back, and literally have not gone back into a darkroom. So, I mean, my experience with it, I first learned how to do film developing when I was 13 years old. I was blessed that there was a local photo studio that let me go and literally hang out after school. I would sweep the floors. I would be their assistant. On Saturdays, I would dress up in a shirt and tie and go to weddings with them and carry gear and stand in the corners of rooms and hold flashes up above my head. Well, we didn't call them flashes. They were potato mashers. If you know what a potato masher is, you're officially old. Okay. But I would stand and I would hold those up. And then my pay for the week was a cheesesteak. Best cheesesteak in town. But yeah, I mean, for me, I'm glad that I learned film. I used to be of the mentality, and I said this out loud more than one time, but I was of the mentality that you couldn't really learn photography properly unless you learned on film. I was one of those photographers that said that. It's wrong. But in my defense, and in the defense of those other photographers that still say it, they just haven't figured it out. When I started teaching, I started to realize what it was that made film such a great learning experience, and realized that, well, you could still do that even without film. What made film a great learning experience was it was deliberate, and you had to have patience. So first of all, shooting film back in the day, even before I got a dark room, you know, that's when you took pictures and then you waited 7 days to find out how much you suck. Okay. And then even when you do your own film processing, you can't hurry that up. It's a process. You got to develop the film. Then you got to wash it, rinse it, let it dry. Then you got to print it, wash, rinse, dry, right? So there's a discipline that is inflicted on you from the beginning because of the process. Digital comes along, and then we have this immediacy, right? It's like Polaroids on steroids, truly. So what was lost in the equation initially was the idea that you still have to learn the basics. You still have to have a foundation. Does any of this part sound familiar with the way that I teach, right? Because the fact of the matter is, you look at any successful photographer today, they've got that foundation. And there are a lot of successful photographers today, real photographers, that do not have a film foundation, but they have the discipline and they have the commitment to learning, and they've put in the effort, right? So for me today, I am strictly of the mentality that film is a 4-letter word. Remember what your mama taught you. Don't use 4-letter words. Kind of like Sony. You know, sorry, I'm kidding. I have to say that, right? No, I'm kidding. But yeah, I'm just no film for me at this point. So, all right, let's see here. All right. Oh, actually, Lynn, thank you for reminding me about Good Olympus too. So a couple little social media things here, really quick, gang. Today, I did a takeover of the Olympus Instagram stories, so you can see them. It's like a Q&A. If you go to Instagram's Olympus's profile on Instagram, I just put the link in the chat window, and you see it right here, Joe Takeover. If you click on that, you'll be able to see all the little video clips that come up, all the questions, the answers, that kind of stuff. Also, it's worth mentioning that if you don't follow me on Instagram, you should be. Whoops, let me start mine. So there's my Instagram profile there. I'm going to share that link. And obviously, if you're not following me, a follow would be appreciated. But I recently started a new Instagram profile. So it's a second one that I'm going to keep going even when this coronavirus thing is over. I'm going to keep it going. And this is all for my abstract photography. Okay. So if you haven't checked it out yet, check it out. You will recognize some of the images. There's some you haven't seen yet, but there's many more to come. So far, I'm posting at least an image a day on that profile. So, it is my goal to keep that going as long as possible. Okay. And let's see here. Next question coming up. What do we got? Scrolling on down. And where are we at? What? Oh, sorry, guy. I got myself a little bit out of order there. All right. There's a question here from It's My Clickyar about 360 photography. I'll be honest with you. I've done little to no 360 photography, so I'm not really by any means an expert on that I would want to be telling you, oh yes, definitely do this or do that. So let's see. Craig Schroeder, Joe, why did you decide to move to Olympus instead of Fujifilm, for example, when you left Nikon? Well, Craig, you must be a new follower. That's okay. I will give you a couple of references here. I am going to switch over, take you to my YouTube channel, and if we actually just type in the word Nikon on the magnifying glass, I'm going to get you the link here. This video right here will tell you all about it. This is Goodbye Nikon, why I switched to Olympus. The short version is, Craig, I was an Olympus user for a Nikon user for 42 years, and I wasn't using my cameras. I was using my iPhone. The only time I picked up my Nikons is if I was getting paid, which is really pretty ridiculous. I had the Nikon D810, the Nikon D850 had just been announced. It's like, these cameras are getting stupidly expensive, and what am I getting for this? So it took about a year and a half of research, experimenting, playing around, renting cameras, borrowing cameras, almost pulling the trigger, then not pulling the trigger because I was kind of afraid after 40 some years, But I finally made the switch, and believe me, I'm thrilled on so many levels. I mean, obviously becoming an Olympus Visionary, I had no idea about that. That was a lot of luck and a lot of dominoes that fell in the right places. But I bought my Olympus gear. I, made the switch, paid for it, sold off my Nikon stuff within 2 weeks. So, in fact, there's some regulars here that come to TOGCHAT that are owners of some of my previous Nikon gear. But, that's why. So, as far as why not Fuji, very, very simple. Fuji's making some really nice cameras for me. So, let's not start a debate because there's no debate. For me, the ergonomics of Fuji cameras, horrible. I don't like the feel of the camera. I actually don't like the look of the camera, but I don't care what it looks like. But I don't like the feel. I don't like the way it fits in my hands. I don't like where the controls are. Nada. And at the time that I switched, Craig, remember, I've been an Olympus user for 4+ years now. Almost 4 years. Okay, almost 4 years. Fuji didn't have much of a system then. Obviously, they've come a long way since. It's kind of where I was with Sony. I tried Sony 2 years before I switched to Olympus. I tried Sony. And at the time, Sony only had 4 lenses. I refused to use adapters. So I wasn't too worried about the lens aspect because obviously I knew that they would build lenses. And same with Fuji. I knew they would build lenses. But I also wasn't that big of a fan of the Sony ergonomics. And, fortunately, I never bought a Betamax. But I'm also very aware of the fact that Sony is a company that is not a technology company, and they are a company that's known for just dropping products and product lines on a dime. So do I think that would happen to Sony at this point? No. Obviously, they're making way too much money. And they've adopted a business model very similar to what Canon and Nikon, or not Nikon, excuse me, but Canon and Olympus and Fuji and the other companies do, in that they don't really build cameras because they want to build cameras. They build cameras because they can. They build cameras because they build the sensors. They make their money from sensors. The camera business was like a big bonus for them. That was not part of the original plan, right? So yeah, Fuji, just not a big fan. I don't understand the cameras. I just do not like the design, period. So, but yeah, the people, I know quite a few people that have them, and they love them. So also, it's worth noting, one of the things that Fuji users love about Fuji is their color engine, because it's got that bluish vibe, just like the old Fujifilm. I hated that. I think I shot one roll of Fujifilm my entire life because it's so everybody was blue. Like, what the heck is this? So yeah, I just didn't like it. It's okay. It's all matter of preference. Okay. All right. Next up here, where are we at? Mike Zupanik. Whoop, there it is. Do I still use the Savage Edgelit Pro LED lamps? And if so, do you still rate them as highly as you did in the 2017 video? Yeah, man. Love them. Absolutely love them. And I still use them. Yes. So they've actually been used for some of the abstracts that I've shot in the last week. I will frequently pull them out for lighting for video stuff that I'm doing. So I keep them in a Pelican case. I have a set of 4 of them that's in a case that is good to go. So yeah, I'm definitely a big fan of them. Okay. Let's see. Scrolling on down. What we got here, and let's see. Gabriel, would you photo stack in Photoshop an image when using the high res mode? You don't have to photo stack it, because that's actually what the camera's doing. The camera's doing pixel shift and shooting all the images and then compositing it in camera. And then you're coming out, like if you're using the EM1 Mark III, you're coming out with an 80 megapixel file on high res shot mode. So yeah, you don't actually have to, do that. It takes care of it for you. Okay. All right, let's see here. Cooley, what do you think about using billboards for advertising? You mean for a photographer to use a billboard? Truthfully, I think it's probably one of the dumbest ideas ever. At least right now. I mean, let's face it. What kind of clients are you going to get right now? You're not. Down the road, here's the problem with a billboard, right? Regardless of what I think will work or not work, right? It is extremely hard to measure your return on investment, ROI. It's extremely hard to measure return on investment on a billboard, because you're going to pay a set fee per month. And the billboard company is going to tell you, well, this car or this billboard in this location gets X amount of cars per day, per week, per month that go past it. So that's X amount of eyeballs. But here's what they can't tell you about those eyeballs. They can't tell you what percentage of those eyeballs are potential customers of yours in the first place. So by the time you parse that number down to actual potential customers, and then there's this. Once you see that billboard, how are they going to contact you? You better have a billboard that is so amazing that they're going to remember your name, or better yet, your phone number, or better yet, your email address. So you tell me, Cooley, driving down the road, how many phone numbers do you remember off the billboards? How many website addresses do you remember off the billboards? You see the billboard enough, if it's catching your attention, you tend to remember the name of the place. And then if you think about it in your time of need, what are you going to do? You're going to Google it. And then you're going to get the contact information, which means that in order for somebody to catch you after they've seen your billboard, they're going to have to jump through some hoops to do that. So then you also have to look at the idea of, well, who's your target audience? And are they the kind of people that will do that? If you're targeting young millennials or Gen Zers, good luck with that, man, because they're not going to put in that much effort. If they can't click on it from Instagram or Pinterest, you're done, right? So, yeah, I don't see billboards as being ultimately the way to go unless you're able to do something that's so unique that it's just going to bowl people over that they're going to be like, oh my God, I've got to get a piece of this, right? But definitely at least not right now. So, okay. Let's see here. Scrolling on down. Matthew, I bought cheap cellophane and gaffer tape into my LED lights. It works fine with LEDs and it's super cheap. Yeah, oh, absolutely. I mean, guys, you can create gels with darn near anything. Understand that the cheaper the material and the less photographic the material is, you're not necessarily getting, pure color, so to speak, out of it. But that doesn't make it bad. Because even like all these abstracts that I've been doing with the colors and all the color is subjective. There's no right or wrong, right? So, yeah, you can totally. I mean, some of you have seen me on stage at a trade show for Olympus take a red Solo cup and put it over a flash to get a red background, right? So anything that you can put light through, you can use it as a gel. So let's see here. Sean, gear question, but not exactly photographic. Do you have a preference for the type of chair that you use while editing? Yeah, actually. I sit on a stool. I don't want to get too comfortable when I'm editing. This forces me to sit up, pays attention, it keeps me alert. So yeah, I have one of those nice big office chairs that I don't use because in the office chair I kind of want to sit back, get all chill, and then things take longer. It's like no, stay focused and stay alert. So yeah, I sit on a stool. So, Don, looks like your drum set's running. It's a basic stool. So okay. And David Crooks, constant versus flash, also for portable lights, which LED lights? Again, David, that's one of those questions that, unfortunately, it's not a good question to ask only because I don't know what you want to shoot, right? If you ask just that general question, constant versus flash, all you're going to get back are opinions. The photographer that uses constant is going to say, oh, constant all the way, flash sucks. The photographer that uses flash is say, flash, LEDs, they're not ready yet. What does that tell you? It doesn't tell you anything, right? So, David, if you're still here, tell me what you like to shoot. And then I can at least give some context to my answer. I primarily use strobes. Primarily, I use strobes for everything. But I have LEDs. I use them from time to time. I find myself using them more and more. Depends on the situation. So, give me a little bit of context in terms of what you like to shoot. And I will definitely give you some context in terms of an answer that might at least give you some things to look into and consider. Okay. Adam, what's your go-to paper to print portraits? Luster or something like that? Yeah, I use the basic luster finish. I mean, if I'm doing wall stuff, which that I don't print myself, but if I'm doing wall stuff, I love metallic prints. But it's got to be the right image, right? So, the nice part of it is my fashion portraits and that kind of stuff lend themselves well to a metallic print. Not that I print a lot of those for wall use, but when you walk into my house, there is a 30-some foot wall that leads down from the door on the left-hand side. So I have 24 by 30 inch prints hanging all the way down that wall, framed from vacations that my wife and I have gone on. So they're all kind of scenics from Berlin and Venice and London and places like that. And they're metallic prints, and it's really awesome because the colors and everything just really pops. So, okay. Dave, I just got a response here from David about what type of stuff. So let me scroll down to that and grab that. Portraits could be in a studio and have the option for outside portraits. So then, and see it. I'm glad I asked, David, because at this stage of the game, LEDs are not, there's only one brand of LED that's really, truly up to speed for outdoor portraits. So let me explain what the criteria is first, and then I'll tell you the brand. Because in my video for the Savage Edge-Lit Pros that I did back in 2017, I actually did a shoot with those outdoors. I had my makeup artist, Monet, and we did it outdoors, but we did it at sunset. so that I could get a colored sky behind her, which meant that it was also dimmer light. If I were to go out in the middle of the day with those lights, they're not bright enough to have an impact unless I put my subject in the shade and I light that way. So if outdoor is an issue, especially if you want to be able to kind of match the sunlight to match the ambient light, LEDs are not there yet, except for one brand. So it would be studio all the way, or strobes all the way. If you have the money, there is a company in California called Light and Motion, and they have created a line of LED lights called Stella lights, STLLA, Stella lights. They are amazing. They are small. They are battery operated. They are incredibly bright, and about $1,200 each. So yeah, they're actually not much bigger than a Godox 8200 in size. So they're really sweet, but they're really pricey. So not practical for most of us at this point. I certainly couldn't afford to spend that kind of money on LED lights at this stage of the game. So, okay. All right, scrolling back up here. Elmer, I'm not sure what you mean there. Nikon BS Sony for Astro and Wildlife. I'm not sure what the BS is. Help me out there, and I'll try and help you out there. So, next question. Scrolling down. Let's see. Gabriel, any thoughts on using an iPad Pro for tethering, and what programs for field work, Olympus Workspace or Affinity? So, to the best of my knowledge, Olympus Workspace does not work on the iPad Pro. I've not tried it. I don't think it does. And you definitely cannot tether for Olympus to an iPad yet. You could use the Olympus OI Share app and you can essentially recreate the tethering process, but you're not really tethering. So, for me, I mean, if you're an Olympus shooter, I don't think iPad's quite the way to go yet. I would use the OI Share app if you just need to show some profiles, some like proof images to people. Affinity, I don't know if that works on an iPad or not. I'm not familiar enough with it, unfortunately. But I mean, the thing of it is, at this point, an iPad Pro or a 13-inch MacBook. Hell, take the 13-inch MacBook. I mean, it's not much bigger, right? So, and you've got that much more power, and you can actually, do things with your images. Not to mention that 13-inch MacBook, if you're an Olympus shooter and you're working with the EM5 III, the EM1 III, or the EM1X, that MacBook will also charge your camera. Just saying. So, yeah, I am not. I originally felt, wouldn't it be cool if you could develop images and process images, Photoshop and all that on an iPad? For me, even now you can get Photoshop and it's pretty functional on the iPad, it's too small. For me, I'm all about the details. So it's too small a space to be, to do it in a pinch. Yeah, like even on my, my 13-inch, MacBook Pro, I'll process something in a pinch, but not one of my fashion portraits or beauty shots. No, I want a massively big screen. I need to be able to blow stuff up. I need to be able to see the detail. So I wouldn't want to work that small, but that's just, my preference. Okay. Let's see, Matthew, have you used OI Track on the phone? Is it any good? Starting to do a bit more wildlife and thought it might be useful to geotag my shots. I haven't, Matthew, because I don't have a need for geotagging. I know people that do. I've even heard, conversations amongst Olympus Visionaries using it, and they like the feature. But I personally, no, I have no reason to use it. So I haven't tried it. I can't speak from firsthand experience. Sorry. Okay. Let's see. Richard Wintle, hand feel. That sounds dirty. and intuitiveness of use are important. I shoot Nikon largely because I like the way my first DSLR felt in my hand. Personal preference is underrated. Richard, I completely agree. By the way, if any of you are a fan of, since you mentioned this now, because this came up in the discussion today, if any of you are fans of Peter Forsgaard, who happens to be an Olympus Visionary in Helsinki, Finland, I was a guest on his live stream today. And actually, we talked about ergonomics and kind of the importance of it is. So I'll put that link in there. You might want to check it out. It was a good conversation. We talked about some good stuff. Peter's a great guy, very talented and incredible technician with his work. Yeah. So I mean, for me, Richard, I don't disagree. Eric, man, thank you so much. I really appreciate the super chat. Thank you. I will tell you, Richard, not that I'm trying to sell you a camera, okay? So don't worry. But if you would have met me 5 years ago, I would have told you the story about I never switched to Canon or Sony because I didn't like their ergonomics. I am only comfortable with Nikon cameras. I thought for sure the first time I picked up an Olympus camera that the ergonomics would be a deal breaker right out of the box. Not at all. The ergonomics are amazing. The one thing I would argue is that Olympus does a better job of button placement than any camera in the market. And what I mean by that is the EM1X is the best example, but they followed through with that on the EM1 Mark III. Not 100%, but they followed through it as much as they can. With the EM1X, when you're holding the camera horizontally, all of your button placement for your top two fingers and your thumb on the horizontal settings, if you rotate the camera to vertical, the button placement is exactly the same. Exactly. Not close, not sort of, exactly. The measurements are identical. So the ergonomic experience, horizontal, vertical, is identical. But yeah, at the end of the day, you've got to be comfortable with the way it feels, right? So that's obviously, number one, it's a lot of money you're investing. Number two, you need to be able to ultimately get yourself to the point where you're not thinking about your gear. Your gear needs to be an extension of your thought process. Super important. So, ergonomics is definitely not discussed enough. And indeed, it's very underrated. Okay. So, all right. Doyle recently switched to Olympus from Canon and couldn't be happier. Welcome to the family, man. That's awesome. Kevin Reap, you mentioned that you don't like adapters. What about teleconverters? Any experience using one? I'm not a big fan of teleconverters either. However, across the board, teleconverters have gotten much better. So I can tell you that I do own the Olympus teleconverter. I have used it occasionally. Obviously, I don't have a lot of need to use a teleconverter when I'm shooting models or people or things like that. But every now and then I'll go out and try wildlife stuff or things like that, and I've used it, and I have been incredibly impressed. So I think because of my own paranoia, Kevin, I would still say somebody, look, if you're going to use a teleconverter, use one that is made by your camera brand. It's going to cost you more, but here's the bonus by doing that. By using a converter, or even for that matter, like the Nikon and the Canon adapters for their mirrorless cameras, while I dislike that idea, I'm not going to buy a third-party one if I was using their cameras. I want to use one that is engineered and manufactured by the same people that made the camera and the lens, right? Because there's just a much better chance of everything fitting together properly. But yeah, I mean, ideally, teleconverters are great if you have an occasional need. If you need that extra focal length a lot, then you save your pennies and you buy the lens that's long enough, and then you're not dealing with a teleconverter, and you're also not dealing with the lost light, as a result. Okay. All right. Let's see. JJ Pino, one of my favorite things about you is your honesty and frankness on all topics. I shot Pentax for many reasons, but ergonomics for me is perfect on all Pentax. So you're one of those weird people. Huh? No, I'm kidding, JJ. Hey, in my defense, and JJ, if you've never seen this, you've got to watch it. And seriously, if the Pentax works for you, that's awesome. Honestly, I think Pentax cameras are highly underrated. But the reason why people always ask me, why are you always like so brutal on Pentax? It's not that I'm brutal on Pentax. I'll be the first to tell you I know nothing about them. It all comes back to a video. In fact, let me see if I can find it. And that way I'll share the link, because otherwise you guys are going to think I'm making it up. There is a incredibly talented photographer named Joey Lawrence. And he did a video that's a rap song, right? And it's all about Pentax and Nikon. And of course, Pentax is basically the butt of the joke in the video. So here, let me see if I can find this video for you guys, and I will share the link. Here it is, the Nikon Girl music video. Yep, that's it. So this is like 10 years ago he made this video, and I don't know why. It's just always stuck in my head. So here, I will share that link with you guys. Whoops, that's not it. I will share the link with you guys, and you can go ahead and check it out. So I promise you, I've got nothing against Pentax. It's just that every time somebody mentions Pentax, I think of this music video, and it's actually pretty hysterical. So, all right. Oh my God, it's like 7:01. Crap. Let's get another picture here, or another question in. So, Cooley, if I were going to pick one type of marketing, what would I choose? Oh, dude, it's social media. I mean, social media is where it's at, but it's doing it the right way. Cooley, you need to make sure you're signing up for my my marketing webinars. And even though the one next Friday, it's next Friday at 1 p.m., it doesn't say it's about marketing, it's personal branding. Start there. Seriously. What you'll walk away from after that webinar, you'll walk away with an understanding of the right concepts and the right philosophies and attitudes to approach social media with. Because believe me, social media done wrong is just a waste of time. Social media done wrong is obnoxious. Social media done wrong is just it's a time suck. It's horrible. Social media done right is the most effective form of advertising that is available today, and it's the least expensive when it's done right. So while I'm not going to be getting into social media in that talk, it's about personal branding, there will be a lot of mention about social media. Cooley, no, you must not have been here in the beginning. It's not, here, let me switch my screen over. It's not part of the mentor group, Cooley. Here, let me switch over really quick. It's an actual webinar, so, and it's free. Let me grab whoops, I can get the link over here for you, and I'll put it in the chat window. It's also a little bit earlier in the chat window. So sign up for it. It's next Friday, 1 o'clock. It's absolutely free to attend. I guarantee you it will help you in terms of understanding kind of the philosophy that you need to start out with when you really want to start building marketing, regardless of what kind of marketing you do. Okay? All right, one last question, because Daryl did a super chat here. Daryl, thank you so much for the super chat, by the way. But since I'm over time, I don't want to walk away without getting that. His question is, have I hit the wrong button there, guys. Here we go. This is it. Okay. So I got Joey Lawrence thing here. Why can't I get Daryl's question? There it is. Daryl's asking me, have you been able to connect the Tether Tool Air Direct to the iMac 27-inch running OS Catalina 10.15.4 with the Olympus M1X? When I tried it, it goes into wait mode and never connects. Okay, so Daryl, I can't hear. I'm not even sure which Catalina am I on. I'm definitely on the newest 10.5. Yeah, okay, so that I have not tried the EM1X yet. I have an Air Direct that Tether Tool sent to me so that I can try it out and also teach people about it, which I will do. I have used it on the EM1 Mark III without any problems. In fact, it connects actually really pretty doggone quick. So I won't be able to do it tomorrow, Daryl, but I will try over this weekend to find 5 minutes and set it up on my EM1X and see if I can get it to connect, because that is what I'm running on this machine. And I usually work with my laptop. Let me see what's on that. I think my laptop is up to date with Catalina as well. 10.15.4, yeah. So I will try it and see if I can get it hooked up for you. But I will tell you, Tether Tools is usually really responsive. So if you're having problems, I would, hit their tech support and give them a try. But if you can be patient for a couple days, I'll let you know what I come up with. Okay. All right, gang. So this is an awesome night. You guys are awesome. We had a lot of different countries here tonight, which is just so cool. So hopefully I will see a lot of you tomorrow night for my webinar. That's at 6 p.m. Understanding Creativity to Improve Your Photography. I'll be back next Wednesday, of course, with TOGCHAT. And for those of you in the mentor group, I'll see you Friday night for Zoom. And in the meantime, gang, you all know the drill, right? Remember these words.
Thanks for watching another live episode of TOGCHAT. Now, pick up that camera and shoot something, because your best shot is your next shot. So keep learning, keep thinking, and keep shooting. Adios.